Hey, welcome to Draft Academy. My name is Mike. In this tutorial, I want to talk to you guys some more about if statements. Specifically, we're going to be talking about using comparisons with if statements. So in any if statement, you're going to need a condition. And a condition is basically a true or a false value. One of the cool things about Ruby, though, is we can use a comparison in order to get a true or false value. So inside of our condition in our if statement, we can actually compare different values. And depending on the result of that comparison, we'll be able to either execute the code inside of the if statement or move on. So I'm going to show you guys how we can do this. It's really awesome and it's a super powerful feature. What I want to do in this tutorial is actually create a method. So I want to create a method called max. And this method is going to take three numbers as input. So it's going to take three parameters. And basically what it's going to do is it's going to return whichever number is the largest. So whichever number out of the three is the biggest, it'll basically return that back to the user. And this is a great example of a situation where you'd want to use comparisons inside of your if statements. So let's get started. I'm just going to come down here and we'll start making our function or our method. So I'm just going to say def, and we're going to call it max, and I'm going to make an open and close parentheses. Inside of this parentheses, I can specify any parameters that I want this method to take in. So I'm just going to say num1, num2, and num3. Basically, we're taking in three numbers. Now, down here, I'm just going to say end. And inside of this method, we have to devise an algorithm to figure out which number is the biggest, right? So inside of this method, we don't know which of these is the biggest, right? We have no idea. We have no idea what the user input into here. So we need to use an if statement in order to figure that out. So I can say if. Now, inside of this condition, I can actually compare two numbers. So I could say if num1 is greater than or equal to num2 and num1 is greater than or equal to num3. So remember, inside of an if statement, we need to put a condition here. And in the last tutorial, when we were using conditions, we were putting in true or false Boolean values. What you'll notice is when I compare two values, when I compare num1 and num2, this is actually going to get resolved into a true or a false value. So this comparison is either true or it's false. Num1 is either greater than or equal to num2 or it's not. This is actually going to end up being a Boolean value. This is going to end up being true or false. Same thing over here. Num1 is either greater than or equal to num3 or it's not. It's a Boolean value. There's only two possible situations here. It's either true or it's false. We didn't actually have to put like true or false here. We were able to use a comparison in order to get a true or false value. So if num1 is greater than num2 and it's greater than num3, then we can just return num1 because we know that's the maximum number. Down here, I'm just going to say else if, and I want to check another condition. So I'm going to check to see if num2 is greater than num1, or actually greater than or equal to num1, and num2 is greater than or equal to num3. So if num2 is bigger than num1 and num3, in other words, if the result of both of these comparisons is true, then we know that num2 is the biggest number. So we're just going to return that. And finally, we can use an else statement. So I can use that else keyword. I can just say else. And down here, we can just return num3. Because if num1 isn't the biggest and num2 isn't the biggest, then we can be pretty sure that num3 is the biggest. So this is basically how we can use comparisons inside of our if statements. I also want you guys to notice that I was able to use this return keyword multiple times, right? So if this condition is true, we can just return the number. All right, so let's go ahead and run this function. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to call this function. I'm going to say max, and I'm going to pass it three numbers, 1, 2, and 3. So if I print this out, I print out the value that gets returned. Actually, I'm going to put it. I should get a 3 back. So let's go ahead and run this. And actually, you'll see I'm getting an error over here. I forgot to put in the end keyword. So down here, we just have to put in end. So you'll see we have an end keyword here, and this ends off this if statement. We have another end keyword here, and this ends off this function declaration. So that's something to keep in mind. You always want to make sure that you're remembering to include this end keyword. You can see how easy it is to forget. I just forgot it. So I'm going to run this program and you'll see we're getting 3. So I passed it 3 numbers. If I was to make this middle number the largest, so we'll make it 20, now it should return 20. If I was to make the first number the largest, it's going to return that. So we now have a valid working max function that will always tell us what the maximum number is. So I just want to point this out one more time what was happening. Instead of putting a true or a false value in there, we actually indirectly put a true or a false value in there by making a comparison. And the result of that comparison is either going to be true or false. There's no other situation, right? Num1's either greater than or equal to num2 or it's not. I'm also using something called a comparison operator. So this right here is a comparison operator. It's an operator that we can use to compare different values. This one is greater than or equal to. But there's also some other ones. So for example, probably the most basic is a double equals. And this basically means equal to. I can put a exclamation point in equal sign. This means not equal to. So this would be like num1 is not equal to num2. We can do a greater than sign, a greater than or equal to sign, a less than sign, a less than or equal to sign. And all of those are going to allow us to compare different values. It's also important to note that in addition to just using numbers, you could also use strings here. So you can compare different strings. For example, I could compare 2 strings for equality. I could check to see if one string was equal to another string. And that's really a powerful way that we can use these if statements, is by checking comparisons. A lot of times in your programs, you're going to want to compare different values, and depending on the results of those comparisons, do different things. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe to Draft Academy to be the first to know when we release new content. Also, we're always looking to improve, so if you have any constructive criticism or questions or anything, leave a comment below. Finally, if you're enjoying Draft Academy and you want to help us grow, head over to draftacademy.com/contribute and invest in our future.